The presence of a single toxic individual within an organization can completely dismantle decades of carefully cultivated corporate culture, drain millions of dollars in hidden operational costs, and inflict severe psychological trauma on an entire workforce. In his groundbreaking and uncompromised workplace manifesto, The No Asshole Rule, Stanford professor Robert I. Sutton strips away the polite, euphemistic language of traditional human resource handbooks to confront an ugly corporate reality: organizations that tolerate abusive, demeaning, and brilliant but toxic jerks are systematically sabotaging their own economic and human performance. Sutton introduces a rigorous, data-driven framework that elevates workplace incivility from a minor interpersonal nuisance to a catastrophic systemic risk. Through a brilliant combination of behavioral psychology, organizational case studies, and hard financial metrics, the book serves as an institutional blueprint to help companies identify, weed out, and protect themselves against the corrosive spread of everyday workplace cruelty. To build an organization free from psychological pollution, a leader must first learn to isolate and define the specific behavioral patterns of a true toxic offender. Sutton is incredibly careful to draw a sharp operational distinction between a temporarily stressed employee who occasionally suffers a bad day and a deeply embedded, chronic workplace bully. A person qualifies as a legitimate target of the rule if they engage in a consistent, ongoing pattern of behavior that leaves their targets feeling systematically demeaned, insulted, energized with fear, or thoroughly drained of their self-worth. These toxic interactions are rarely manifested through explosive, spectacular public shouting matches that draw immediate HR attention. Instead, they are delivered through a million microscopic cuts of everyday cruelty. Think of the casual, biting sarcasm during a team meeting, the calculated withholding of vital information, the deliberate use of rolling eyes, or the subtle backhanded compliments designed to undermine a colleague's confidence. Furthermore, Sutton provides a brilliant, definitive field test to expose a chronic bully. Look closely at how the individual treats people who are less powerful, lower in the corporate hierarchy, or completely useless to their immediate career advancement. The person who behaves with absolute, exquisite charm toward senior executives while treating administrative assistants, janitors, and junior developers with cold, patronizing contempt is a classic textbook toxic actor whose presence will inevitably poison the cultural well. This toxic behavior is not merely an ethical or cultural problem. It carries an immense, quantifiable financial penalty that Sutton conceptualizes as the total cost of assholes, or TCA. Many short-sighted executives routinely look past the abusive behavior of a top-performing salesperson, a brilliant engineer, or a highly connected partner, defending them under the dangerous myth that their immense talent outweighs their difficult personality. This is a profound manifestation of financial blindness that completely ignores the hidden, compounding economic leaks generated by a bully's daily interactions. When you meticulously calculate the true TCA within an organization, you uncover an astonishing array of direct and indirect expenses that instantly wipe out whatever individual profit that top performer generated. Consider the massive, exhausting hours spent by HR managers, mediators, and executives attempting to document complaints, smooth over fractured relationships, and rebuild shattered team dynamics after a toxic outbreak. Add to that the staggering costs of employee turnover as your most talented, creative, and collaborative workers quietly walk out the door to escape the abuse, forcing the company to spend fortunes recruiting and training their replacements. Furthermore, behavioral data reveals that teams operating under the shadow of a chronic bully suffer a devastating drop in cognitive processing, collaboration, and basic productivity. Workers become hyper-vigilant, hoarding information to protect themselves, refusing to take creative risks out of a fear of public humiliation, and spending their working hours gossiping or looking for new jobs rather than innovating. To insulate an organization against this systemic economic decay, management must possess the courage to enforce the rule with absolute, uncompromising consistency during the hiring process. The single best way to manage toxic behavior within a company is to prevent it from ever entering the building in the first place. This requires a radical shift in traditional recruiting metrics, where a candidate's interpersonal history and collaborative reputation are weighted just as heavily as their technical skills, Ivy League credentials, or past revenue generation. During the interview process, smart organizations look past the carefully rehearsed, polished answers of a candidate to aggressively backchannel their references, speaking directly to their former peers, subordinates, and administrative staff. If a candidate boasts a brilliant track record of individual achievement but leaves behind a trail of broken spirits, high turnover, and toxic wreckage at their previous employer, they must be treated as a walking liability and ruthlessly disqualified. Sutton highlights companies that go so far as to immediately terminate new hires who display early signs of cruelty during their onboarding period, sending a powerful, unshakable signal to the entire organization that cultural alignment is a non-negotiable condition of employment. However, if a toxic individual has already successfully embedded themselves within your ranks, the leadership team must immediately pivot from prevention to aggressive, swift containment. Abusive behavior behaves exactly like a highly contagious biological pathogen. If left unaddressed or excused by senior management, it rapidly normalizes itself within the corporate ecosystem, infecting well-meaning employees who begin adopting the same aggressive tactics just to survive. When an employee realizes that the company consistently rewards and promotes people who scream at colleagues, take credit for others' work, and rule through terror, they naturally conclude that cruelty is the true, hidden currency of corporate advancement. To halt this cultural rot, leaders must swiftly isolate the offender, stripping them of managerial authority, removing them from collaborative projects, and delivering clear, explicit behavioral warnings with teeth. If the individual refuses to radically alter their behavior after an initial intervention, they must be terminated immediately, regardless of how brilliant their talent or how critical their technical knowledge seems to be. The short-term pain of losing a key technical producer is nothing compared to the long-term explosive liberation of team energy and productivity that occurs the exact moment a bully is permanently removed from the ecosystem. For the individual investor, author, or professional who finds themselves trapped in a toxic environment without the institutional power to fire the abuser, Sutton provides a vital toolkit of psychological defense mechanisms to preserve their sanity. When you cannot escape a toxic workplace immediately due to financial constraints or contractual obligations, you must learn the art of emotional detachment, framing the bully not as a terrifying monster, but as a fascinating, deeply flawed specimen in a laboratory. By stepping back and viewing the abuser's outbursts with cold, clinical curiosity, you strip them of their power to hurt your self-esteem, turning their insults into empty, pathetic noise that says everything about their insecurity and nothing about your value. Furthermore, you must actively build a shadow network of psychological safety, a tight-knit alliance of trusted, supportive colleagues who can validate your reality, offer emotional shelter, and help you document every instance of abuse with precise, objective detail. Never make the mistake of suffering in silence or gaslighting yourself into believing that you deserve the treatment. Protect your energy, keep your eye on the exit, and recognize that your primary duty is to preserve your psychological health until you can transition to a culture that respects your humanity. Ultimately, the no asshole rule is a fierce, deeply humanizing manifesto that reclaims the true meaning of institutional greatness. It forces us to completely reject the archaic Machiavellian belief that fear, cruelty, and public humiliation are necessary or effective tools to drive high-performance results in a complex economy. True, sustainable corporate leverage is built on a foundation of psychological safety, radical respect, and mutual trust, an environment where every single human being feels safe enough to bring their best, most creative ideas to the table without a fear of being demeaned. The journey to building a world-class organization requires an ongoing, daily commitment to enforcing civil boundaries, practicing radical empathy, and refusing to let short-term individual talent excuse systemic human destruction. By recognizing the true, devastating financial cost of toxicity, automating your cultural defense systems, and standing up for the dignity of every worker, you break the chains of corporate dysfunction forever. The next time you find yourself tempted to excuse an act of cruelty in the name of profit or talent, pause, remember the math of human dignity, and choose the civilized workplace you actually deserve.